everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sport Vitamins. Today we talk about baseball with a special guest, another strength coach, 2009 World Series winner, Dana Cavalea. Welcome to Sport Vitamins, Dana. Thanks for being with us today.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on today for three reasons. First of all, I'm a strength coach, you're a strength coach, so I can learn a lot from this conversation. Second, I grew up being a baseball player. I'm very excited. And third, maybe the most important one, I grew up being a great Yankees fan. So I'm super excited.
All right.
So then, you were the head strength coach for the New York Yankees for 12 years, right?
Yes.
Tell me how it all started. Can you give the listeners a quick background?
Yeah, I mean, very simply, I was a player myself, and I had aspirations and hope of, getting to the big leagues and being a player myself. I realized that my talent was not enough to get me there, so I had to make a change. And I realized that I still wanted to be involved with sports. And I said, what do you love to do the most outside of playing? And I actually love to train for the sport myself. That's what I really enjoyed doing. So I started to explore different career options. So I got a degree in sports medicine, exercise science, and I started just in my career as an intern with an American football team at the University of South Florida in Tampa. And I really wasn't interested in football, but I was interested in learning about the craft of strength and conditioning and performance. So I got my feet wet there, and I went to school in Florida. So the Yankees actually had their spring training and preseason there. So one day I took a drive up to the stadium to watch practice, and I pulled out my phone and I was taking pictures. And, that day I actually had to go back to my internship, which was, at the university. And the coach there that I worked under asked me if I had any interest in going to assist the Yankees because he got a call from the coach over there looking for somebody to hand out water and hand out towels and just basically supervise the weight room. And I said, you know what? I would absolutely love that. I just got back from there. And he says, well, you start tomorrow. So the next day I drove up. They threw a credential around my neck that said C for clubhouse, F for field access. And the next thing you know, that same field I was taking a picture of a day earlier, I was now in the middle of. And I was now a part of the staff as an intern, but I was still a part of the staff. And that's how I got my first opportunity. I worked for free. I did as much as I could. I showed up every single day with enthusiasm and excitement. And I realized that at 19 years old, I had a great opportunity to accelerate my path and get to the major leagues as fast, probably a lot faster than I would have as a player. So that's how I got started.
Oh, that's great. And it's amazing what you just told me. I mean, one thing that most of the successful coaches has in common is that they started from scratch, from nothing, doing maybe stuff that nobody wants to do, and following two basic rules, like show up consistently, basically.
Yeah, it's the best way to do it because you have nothing to lose. I had only to gain. I really didn't know a whole lot at the time because I was just starting off. So what I really started to do was create differentiation by learning. So this was back when core development training and functional training was just beginning in our industry. And I researched as much as I could about core development, functional training, functional movement. And that became my selling point. So when a player would walk in, I'd say, hey, you want me to take you through some core? You want me to take you through some functional development training? And, I became the guy, that was known for that within our organization. And then gained the players' trust and built relationships. And from there, they allowed me to do more and more with them. So, I have some friends that were in the industry at the same time, and they were working at local gyms. And for me, I always say I got a chance to learn on Formula One race cars, the fastest cars in the world and the best cars in the world. So that's where I got to learn my craft.
And you said that you started with American football, even though you were a baseball player before. Was it hard, the transition from one sport to the other one?
Just from a mentality standpoint, I'm not an aggressive guy in that way where I'm about the impact and football. That's not really my game. I enjoy watching it, but I don't enjoy. I really didn't enjoy coaching it. It just wasn't. I couldn't relate the way I did with the sport of baseball. And I also, having played baseball, I was also able to relate to the player in terms of their mentality and their mindset, and helping them deal with failure, which is what they were exposed to over and over again in being a baseball player. In football, I just couldn't provide the life lessons that I was able to provide baseball players.
Okay. I was reading this book from Mark Cuban, and he was saying, work like there is someone working 24 hours to take it all away from you. Do you agree with this?
I think it sounds better than it actually is. I mean, I worked hard and I worked to be the best, but early in my career, I did work like that, and it actually burnt me out quite a bit, so I was always feeling like I had to be working and working and working, and as a result, I got tired. So I wasn't actually the best that I can be. So, but what I learned from was players like Derek Jeter, who were the best in the world, Mariano Rivera, great players. And what they taught me was actually the opposite. It wasn't about working long hours and working and working and working and working. It was about finding what it is that you need to work on, and work on those things that you need to work on. And when you actually go to work hard while you're at work, but it's also really important to unplug, rest, recover, and regenerate your physical self and your mental self at the same time, so you can come back tomorrow ready to play at 100%.
Very interesting. And also, of course, finding the right things to work on. Of course.
Yeah, and that comes through knowing, who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and also relying on others around you in your inner circle, whether it be coaches, whether it be teammates, whether it be coworkers, or whether it be family, to help you identify what your weaknesses are. And there's a lot of talk right now that says don't focus on your weaknesses, but some of your weaknesses can also hijack your strengths. So here you're really strong, but this negative trait that you have could be canceling out some of your strengths. So I'm really big on making sure you got a real positive circle around you. I'm really big on coaches getting coached by other coaches, so you can make sure that you're positioning yourself for success and you're moving yourself in the right direction.
And when you're an athlete, of course, you need to trust your coach, and you have the right person there to guide you.
Exactly. And the right person is not the person that always tells you what you want to hear or what you need to. They tell you what you need to hear.
How important is for you to build a relationship with your athletes?
Without a relationship, you can't coach an athlete. Without a relationship, you can't coach anybody. So it's actually relationship first, coaching second. So you have to get somebody to know you, like you, and trust you, and then they'll allow you and give you permission to actually coach them. But if you think you're going to go coach them first, you're going to be in big, big trouble.
Sure. You start as an intern, and you work your way up to the big leagues, and you made it to the big leagues at such a young age, at the age of 23, right?
Yeah, I made it to the big leagues at 23. I started interning, like I said, at 19. So.
Wow, that's impressive. So.
Yeah.
Your feelings when they said, Dana, you're the main guy now at the age of 23.
Well, I had the same feelings that a player would have when they got promoted to the big leagues, and it was exciting. I mean, listen, I had the opportunity of a lifetime, and I have an opportunity that most 23-year-olds did not have, and still to date don't have. I was one of the youngest strength coaches in professional sports, so that comes with immense responsibility, and it comes with a lot of discipline to stay on track, because there's a lot of distractions and a lot of things that could take you away and off your game. So I had to stay focused, but I also had to always remember, realize, and be grateful for the opportunity that I had.
Of course. And you always have to find yourself ready to seize the opportunity, of course.
Exactly.
You never
100%.
know. You never know when it's going to come.
Yeah, and you don't know when it's going to end. I always say, when you are a coach, you have to realize that part of coaching, unlike many other disciplines and fields of study, is a coach is a very short-term career. You can coach for a long time, but if you look at the history of coaches, most coaches don't stay with the same organization for more than a couple years. So it's just what the field is, and I say that there's an hourglass and it's filled with sand, and the day you start your job, you turn it over. Some days it moves really fast, and other days it slows down, and other days it actually can come to a stop. But for the most part, it's always moving just a little bit. There's always a little bit of sand, so your career is passing you while you're still in it. So you got to make sure you continue to do a great job, and that you also understand that this is just what coaching is. If there's a change of management, if there's a change of a head coach, you may go too. Just be ready.
Interesting. So at the age of 23, as you said, you were the main guy in a major league team. How did you make the players buy into your job, what you were doing? Because most of the players, I guess, were older than you. And most of them also knew that that was your first experience as a head strength coach.
Well, actually, you know, those few years that I was an intern first, I got to know all these players. So I actually became very friendly with them. So because I always lead with the relationship first, they actually protected me and went to battle for me. So when the gentleman ahead of me got let go, they actually became advocates for me to become the head guy. And there's nothing better than having the support of your players and support of your team to help you get to your next place and your next stop in your career. So it was great. You know, I had a team, which was my team, supporting me and helping me to get to where it is that I wanted to go. So it was difficult at times because I knew that I wasn't prepared to the level I would be by the end of my career. But I also knew I had an opportunity, and that's where I had to really focus on being not just a coach, but also a student at the same time.
Okay. Can you give a few tips to a young coach that finds himself in the same situation?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing is to, again, begin with a relationship first with your players. You know, don't try to do too much. You're going to feel the pressure that you put on yourself of not being good enough and not being ready just yet. But ultimately, you're ready. You just have to know that every year, if you're committed to getting better and better, you will get better and better. You won't be at the end of your career, which you are at the beginning, and at the beginning of the career, you won't be what you will be at the end. So I always say, you know, volunteer yourself whenever you get the opportunity to learn, ask questions, you know, humble yourself and get yourself out there and realize that your success will come from your ability to learn, not just from others, and it'll also come from just you being on the job and asking the right questions to those that you coach. That's where a lot of professional coaches develop, is in their setting and in their workplace. What I find is a lot of people, they get the job and then they get comfortable or they get lazy and they say, well, this is what I do. This is what I know what to do. This is what I do. But they actually don't get better every year at their job because their comfort level takes priority over their desire to continue to learn and develop as a coach. You never arrive.
Sure. How do you make sure that you keep learning and learning every day?
Well, I think that comes from within you, and that's the desire. I say you have to realize again that sand is it's moving. So if you don't learn and you don't desire to learn and get better every single day, what's going to happen? You know, somebody else is going to have the opportunity to showcase their skills and maybe show the general manager that hired you, hey, I can do a better job than this guy, and here's why. And then the general manager says, hey, I got to keep my job. I want to build a team that could win. I want to make sure that I have the best people possible on my team to help me do so. So the last thing you want is your general manager asking you, hey, are we doing this, and this? And you say, I don't know. I don't even know what that is. So it's really important that as a leader and as a coach that you have to progress much like the field progresses. Even if you don't believe 100% in the technology or in the techniques that are evolving, you got to get serious about it, and you have to make sure that you at least know what's going on within your industry or else you'll become expired very quickly.
Sure. Who's your mentor, or who are your mentors?
My mentors, well, I have, a couple mentors. I always say from a personal standpoint, I have, my parents, I have my wife. That's where I keep myself grounded. But professionally, in terms of mentors, I got the chance to work under Joe Torre as a young coach, one of the greatest managers in Major League Baseball history. And then from a strength and conditioning standpoint, Mike Boyle was a guy here in the States that I really became close with as a young person. I like that he didn't subscribe to what was cool and what was sexy, and he subscribed to what works. And that's my philosophy in life, and that's why I aligned with his philosophy as well in coaching. So we became friendly through the years, and he actually coached the Red Sox for a little bit, and I coached the Yanks. So we spent a lot of time together, and I always admired his philosophy and how he went about his business, influenced but uninfluenced.
Yeah, I love him too. I had the chance to spend 1 week over there at Michael Boyd's Strength and Conditioning, and I like the way he works. I like the fact that he says always, you got to keep it simple, and that's the secret, basically, of our job, I think.
100%.
So you had the chance to coach some of the best players in the world at that time. So like Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Andy Pettitte. What do you think they...
A-Rod.
A-Rod, you're right. What do you think they had in common, and what did it take for them to get to that level?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing they all had in common at first was talent. They're very talented players. But second, they all enjoyed work. They all knew what they needed to do to get their body and mind positioned for success each and every day, each and every off season. They knew as the years passed, there would be different needs that their body and their mind would have in order to succeed in the most competitive professional environment, which is professional sports and professional baseball. So they knew what they had to do to get ready, and they weren't afraid to make adjustments. They weren't afraid to make changes to their routine, to their preparation strategy, and to their day-to-day routine when needed. But ultimately, what made them great was their ability to understand what they needed, who they were as people, and their ability to stay consistent through everything. They are not always... what they did on Monday, they did on Tuesday, they did on Wednesday, they did on Thursday. They weren't changing all the time or saying, hey, I heard about this, or I read this in a magazine, let me try this. They weren't those kind of people. They knew what worked for them, and they stayed with it, and they stuck with it, and they made minor adjustments as needed. And that strategy, where they combined enough work with enough rest, enough hard play in the game with enough, socialization to actually be a real person, I think that whole balance together, along with their coachability, made them great.
I can see a lot of what you said on what happened to me last year. I had the chance to coach and work with Stoudemire. I don't know if you're familiar with basketball.
Yeah.
He was playing for our team last year, and I had the chance to work with him, and he was doing exactly the same thing that you said about Derek Jeter, Rivera, A-Rod, and Pettitte. So
yeah,
that's what it takes to get to that level and to be successful in sport, for sure.
100%.
So let's go a little bit more into details about strength and conditioning. How did you work with those athletes? A Major League Baseball season is such a long season, 162 games, and I'm really curious about how do you work on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and on a weekly basis with them.
Yeah, so pretty simply, I base everything on assessment and evaluation. So I got to know what your needs are. I got to know what you need right now, and it would change oftentimes day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. But the fact that we play every day, there can be changes. If a player gets hurt in a game, we got to make a change. We have to pivot. But what I did was at the start of every season, I had a strategy I used, which was designed to assess and analyze risk. So as a player, as my job was to manage $300 million in human capital and human assets. So when I looked at each player, there was an asset value of anywhere between $1 million and $30 million for the season. So I had to identify what the risk factor was for each player. So what I did was I assessed range of motion of the shoulders, range of motion of the hip, manual muscle tested them, postural assessment, and I took all of that data and information and I created a classification of low risk, moderate risk, or high risk. So if you're a high risk player, we're going to have to spend a lot more time together on your soft tissue, cleaning up motor patterns, cleaning up movement patterns, and cleaning up, joint mobility issues that may exist, and also focusing on cleaning up any sort of firing muscle patterns that I need to get on and make sure that this muscle that is not working begins to actually work in sequence in the way I need it to. So what that led to was putting together a day-to-day program and a day-to-day plan, not their training plan, but their corrective strategy and their preventative strategy that we would work on. And I would have checkpoints, everything from measuring out their hip range of motion internally, externally, shoulder internal, shoulder external, leg length differentials. So I'd look at that every single day on a player. And for those that were high risk, I'd actually have to go into protocol to make sure that they were within ranges or moving towards the appropriate identified ranges for them. From that point, on top of that, then I'd go into their core development, their injury prevention strategy, and then we would strengthen them and condition them. But my program, I'd say 50% of the program was probably geared towards preventative strategy, corrective strategy, and making sure that they were recovered and ready to play. And the other 50% was geared towards strength and conditioning. Now, in the off season, that strategy may change, maybe a little bit more geared towards more strength, more conditioning. But ultimately in season, I got to make sure that these guys are ready to play each and every night. That was the number one goal. It wasn't to hit strength records or make sure that their conditioning levels were off the charts. It was to make sure they were ready to play every single night. And whatever the limiting factor was or may be, I had to correct that and make sure it was no longer a limiting factor, but those athletes were ready to play that night. So my programs were not sexy. They weren't flashy. Most people would walk in and say, wait, that's it? That's how you train the best of the best? And I would say, yep, that's how I train the best of the best. I look for limitations and I correct limitations. But I keep my protocols and my programming very simple, and we become really good at really simple things, as opposed to trying to create programs that look really good on Instagram. I don't care about that.
Sure. Were you using, or do you still use FMS to assess the player?
I didn't find the FMS to have huge carryover in keeping players healthy. I've had players that had 21s on an FMS and still got hurt. I had players that had 15s and didn't get hurt. So what I did was I extracted certain elements of it. I like the overhead squat. I like that test for different reasons. So I extracted that. I'd also take the hurdle step, and I enjoy that because it allowed me to see what was going on in more of a semi-dynamic environment with the hip. So I took the overhead squat, cross-referenced it with the hurdle step, and those were really the only two tests that I took out. The other thing I do heavily was goniometric measurement. Like I said, internal hip rotation, external hip rotation, internal, external shoulder. Take total range of motion, do a bilateral comparison between total range of motion and also between internal and external range of motion, and made sure that my athletes stayed within those ranges all season. If they sustained any kind of injury, the first thing I would do is look at those numbers. And if the differential was too large, I knew that the athlete, even though they said they were feeling good and getting better, there was still a very high risk factor there, especially if those asymmetries were very, very, visible.
Interesting. How many times a week position player does live in the major league?
So Monday, typically it was 3 days a week. I kept them pretty focused on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Obviously travel would influence that, but I tried to really give our guys the weekend off so they could actually feel like they have a weekend where they could do what we call more of a show and go, where you come in, you do your correctives, you do your stretching, you do any prehabilitative work that we need. You may do a few activation sets, get your heart rate up, get your body pliable, get your body warm, and then you go. Get ready to play that day. So that's what I focused on with those guys. And then pitchers, the relievers, I would try to get my pitchers in, honestly, almost 5 days a week to do something. I never based it on games like, oh, they pitched, for starters, yes, but for relievers, oh, they threw last night. Relievers could throw almost every day. So I can't say, well, they may throw tonight, so I got to go easy with them. I made them train And if they happen to pitch, great. And if they didn't happen to pitch, it doesn't matter. They still got their training in.
So it's normal to see a player lifting on game days in baseball.
Oh, yeah. And I made all our players lift before the games because I had a theory where I said, you know what? After the game, you're going to be fatigued, so you have a higher risk for injury. But when players train early, they're training 4 or 5 hours before game time. It's enough time to rest, recover. Our volume isn't high enough to make it, become problematic. But ultimately, I made sure that our players were good and loose and stretched and ready to play. Because after you train, how do you feel? Do you feel tight or do you feel loose? If you train right, you're going to feel nice and loose and ready to go out and play. And that's what I wanted. I wanted our guys to be heated up and feeling good and feeling ready to play.
And then you also concentrate all the load in one single day instead of splitting on 2 days, right?
I did that. Some days I split the load as well. But I was also, after when the game ended, I wanted these guys to think about one thing, and that's recovery. So boom, as soon as the game finishes, when you get to the stadium, guys would go in hot tanks and hot baths to get the body ready. And after the game, boom, they go right into ice and cold water therapy. Shower up and get the heck out. Go home, get some rest, sleep, and we'll see you tomorrow. So I had a level of rigidity with that where I didn't want to compromise any minute or time for recovery. So the game ends, your mentality goes to the game's over, I got to recover for tomorrow.
Okay. So can you tell us which are the most used recovery strategies for MLB players?
Therapy in terms of temperature is a big one. So, cold water, ice baths, even guys, I'd have them like pitchers, we'd go in the pool and do lower body or, swimming based exercise. Those are big ones. As of a couple years ago, we started doing a lot more lymphatic drainage using, Normatec and using some recovery boot strategies. And then it can be as simple as actually for some guys, when we didn't have access to those tools, when we're on the road or we didn't travel with them or there were limitations, stuff as simple as using the bathtub in your hotel room with salts to help you recover. And also massage was another big one that we used. So we used all pretty much a hybrid of modalities and techniques. It's just a matter also in knowing your player. What is this person like and what don't they like? There's some guys that say, I don't do ice. I hate ice baths. I hate cold water. So why would I prescribe that if they're not going to do it? I was never a coach that mandated them to do things. I gave them suggestions and I gave them options.
Okay. And how do you manage the load of an MLB season? How do you decide when you have to sit one player out or not?
Well, are you saying in terms of fatigue or what?
Yeah, in terms of fatigue. Because for basketball, it's super easy. You see how many minutes do they practice. You see how many minutes they play. It's kind of easy.
Yeah. The one thing that we would see is, is there any kind of decline in performance going on? So if we saw a decline in performance, or we saw a decline in energy, or if they were dealing with, aches and pains and just chronic conditions like that, we knew we would have to pull them back a little bit more. So that's something that we really focused on. So that's where I put a lot of my attention.
Really interesting. Usually in basketball, in the middle of the season, the rookies hit a wall. Does it happen also in the MLB?
Not too much. I mean, actually, it could happen to any player, regardless if they're a rookie or a veteran. We didn't see those kind of trends. And you also got to remember, too, like these guys, they're trained to play all through the minor leagues. So they're used to that game volume. It's not like they get to the pros and the volume changes that much. The volume's pretty consistent for them all the way through.
Sure. And when they hit a slump, do you try to change something? Do you try to help them out somehow?
Yeah, I'd like to say we do, but ultimately we just make sure that they're staying consistent with what it is that they do every single day, and they actually don't change too much because, slumps are a part of the game. And oftentimes we find that, slumps, they're often mental, but the actual physical changes that I would make sometimes is either try to keep them more consistent, or if you read a guy that he's tired, he's fatigued, I'd actually give him a full rest. and just kind of try to make it more simple for him and focus more on the recovery aspect than the actual training aspect.
Interesting. Dana, I was listening to another podcast where you were a guest, and you said that one of the secrets is to never get too high, never get too low.
Yeah.
How can you handle this, and how can a player handle this when they play or coach in New York? Because you're used to win a lot, and also there is a lot of pressure.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, but I always say don't attach to the pressure. So there's that there's pressure there, but you get to decide what it is that you attach to. So if you start thinking every day, oh man, there's so much pressure here, there's so much pressure here, it's taking your attention away from actually playing the game. So I want to make sure that our players, like, you have to know where you are and what the expectation is, but whether you play in New York, you play in Texas, you play in Anaheim, it doesn't matter. The expectation is what you have for yourself. What is that expectation you have for yourself? And know that playing our game, listen, you're going to strike out, you're going to have slumps, there's going to be times when you're not doing that great. That's the rules of the game. That's how the game is played, whether you're in Italy, whether you're in Israel, or whether you're in New York. It doesn't matter. So you have to understand the game that you play and realize that there's going to be good, there's going to be bad. You have to find that consistent spot right in the middle of good, right in the middle of bad, right in the middle of high, right in the middle of low. And you say right in the middle. And that comes from you training not just your physicality, but your mentality. And if you train your physicality to be consistent every day, hey, I get my training in, I get my prep work in, then I know that my body is physically ready and prepared to play this game. But mentally, I also have to train myself to stay focused and stay disciplined and not allowing myself to get totally crazy and totally depressed. I have to know that this is the game I play. There'll be moments of glory. There'll be moments of failure. There'll be times when I win. There'll be times when I lose. It's ultimately about staying in the middle and knowing who you are and how you play the game and not trying to change and adapt based on your outcomes.
What's the biggest takeaway from the season of 2009 when you won the World Series and you also won the Nolan Ryan Award for Best Strength Coach of the league?
Yeah, well, I won that award because of the players that I had on my team, right? So we had a great group of guys that made me as a coach look really good. I mean, I helped them quite a bit too, and they helped me quite a bit. So it was a great relationship. But that's actually the takeaway. The takeaway is when you're doing your job right, you get rewarded. But doing it right requires you to give a lot to the players that you work with, and in return, they give back to you. So that's the whole idea. But in 2009, we had a really selfless team that wanted to win more than anything, even more than their own personal accolades. So when one person didn't get it done, the next person stepped in. It was a real supportive group of guys, a real excited group of guys, and they were, again, 100% focused on winning. And the one thing I always say is, my players, they started training for that season in December of the year before, and they got the spring training. They worked really hard. They worked hard all through the season. And I remember being in Philadelphia during Game 4 of the World Series, and they were still in the weight room. My gym was still full. My training facility was still full. Nobody said, well, we're in the World Series now, so we don't have to train. There's only 3 days left maximum in the season. They continued to train even through the World Series. There was no change in preparation strategy. There was no change in training strategy. They worked hard all the way till the end.
Sure. And how can you, as a strength coach, influence and have a huge impact in a successful team?
On the success of a team?
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to make yourself available and realize that as a strength coach and as a coach in general, it's not about you. It's about the people you work with. It's not about how many likes and how many people follow you and you being a celebrity and you being a star. It ultimately comes down to you and how you commit yourself to helping those players that you work with get to the next level in their career. And if you approach your job and your career by saying, hey, how do I get this player to the next place in his career? Help him and help yourself define what that next place is and commit to the process to get that player to that next place. That's how you become great over time, and that's how you create and develop a lot of great players over time, and you create a lot of great assistant coaches and a lot of great interns over time. And people that leave your coaching program, they leave a lot better than when they came in.
Interesting. What's the relationship between a strength coach and the manager in baseball? Because in basketball, the relationship between the strength coach and the head coach is really solid.
Yeah, with some managers, they don't care that much about what goes on as long as the players are ready to play. I worked with Joe Girardi, who was very into training. It was a really important part of the program for him, so he was very involved. But for somebody like Joe Torre, it was, hey, let me know if you have a problem with anybody. But other than that, it was, players, they decided how much they needed, and they, as a manager, some are much more focused on the player development, and others are not.
Okay, I read your book, Habits of a Champion, and the subtitle is "Nobody Becomes Champion by Accident," right?
Yeah, it's a true statement.
What does it mean for you?
Yeah, it means that, listen, if you see anybody that's excelling at anything, you got to realize that there's a lot of work and a lot of time that went into that person becoming of champion status and of champion level. So, it's oftentimes easy to see somebody as great, but you got to realize that there's oftentimes a lot that goes into great. In basketball, Kobe Bryant's one of those players, the dedication, the commitment, the time that he put into being great. Derek Jeter, same thing. You just don't show up and be great. You have to have talent and you have to have ability, but you do have to show up and apply certain lessons and certain things every single day that help you get there.
Yeah, I was reading today an article on Twitter by Mike Reynolds, and he was saying the 5 things that you can learn from Derek Jeter, which are discipline, consistency, lead by example, don't rock the boat, and treat everyone the right way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to learn there, from these guys. But, I also say too, just because these guys have jerseys on their back, you could learn from a lot of people. You could learn from, the equipment guy. You could learn from, the person that washes the uniforms. You could learn from anybody. So don't just say, well, this player's great, so therefore I'm going to learn from him. You can extract lessons from a lot of different people in your journey, and you take the good, you take the bad, and you decide what you want to apply.
Sure. Okay, Dana. So a lot of great content and very useful insight. Usually we finish the episode with 3 quick questions. You have like 5 seconds to answer. So the first one is the player you learned the most from.
Player I learned the most from was Mariano Rivera.
Can I ask you why?
Well, again, from a mindset standpoint, just this, he told me one thing that we decide what we give attention to, and we decide what's a big moment in our life, and oftentimes we make things bigger than they need to be.
Yeah. And second one, who is the athlete you would like to work with?
Well, I'll get in trouble if I answer that question, but one of the guys I really enjoyed working with a lot was Andy Pettit. Just a great pitcher and a great person, and we became very close friends through the years. And it was a very supportive relationship between myself and him and me. And, we spent a lot of time, not just training together, but also, life stuff, spending, having dinner together, having lunch together, having breakfast together, and enjoying each other's company.
Yeah, I think that's priceless. You have that kind of relationship with a player. And the third one, is there another sport or challenge that you would like to work for?
No. I worked, when you work for the Yankees, that's, I don't know if it gets any better than that. And like I said, for me early, baseball's my game. I don't have any interest in any other sports. Tennis is cool. I like to watch it. Soccer's cool. I like to watch it, but I don't have any interest in coaching it.
Okay. So there is some valuable content for a lot of these players and coaches that are following us. And if someone wants to follow you, what's your next move?
Well, if they want to follow me, they can go to DanaCavalea.com. I do a blog Monday through Friday about leadership and just development of the whole person. So you can find me there at Dana Cavalea on Twitter and at The Real Coach D on Instagram.
Okay, Dana, again, thank you very much for being with us. and sharing your knowledge, your experience.
Thank you. Thanks for what you do also. Thank you.
Great episode. I really enjoyed this one. I hope you guys did it too. Special thanks to Massimiliano Geri and the EBSPA for connecting me with Coach Dana. And make sure that you guys check out their website, ibspa.it, and also check out my Instagram page, my Facebook page, and also the Sport Vitamins Facebook and Instagram page. Until next time, I'm out.